Marcus Webb had been staring at the same datapad for 20 minutes, pretending to look busy. The grand hall of Concordia Prime Station buzzed with hundreds of alien species, all dressed in their finest ceremonial garments. As a cultural liaison for Earth, Marcus was supposed to mingle, make connections, and help humanity seem less like the awkward newcomers they were. He adjusted his collar and took another sip of something that tasted vaguely like champagne, but probably wasn't. The Galactic Council's annual reception was the biggest event of the year, and Marcus desperately wanted to be back in his quarters watching old movies. "Webb? Look alive," Ambassador Chun whispered, appearing at his elbow. The older woman's eyes were wide with barely concealed panic. "The Jathir delegation just arrived early. Protocol says we greet them personally." Marcus felt his stomach drop. The Jathir Empire, one of the oldest and most powerful civilizations in known space. Their warriors were legendary, their technology centuries ahead of Earth's, and their empress ruled 47 star systems with absolute authority. "Right," Marcus said, setting down his drink. "Smile. Bow at the appropriate depth. Don't stare at their exoskeletons." I remember the briefing. But no briefing could have prepared him for the sight of Empress KEZ single quotes RATHI. She entered the hall like a force of nature. Standing 9 feet tall, her crystalline exoskeleton caught the light and scattered it in rainbow patterns across the walls. 4 arms moved with precise grace, 2 folded in a formal position across her chest, 2 hanging naturally at her sides. Her head was elongated and elegant, with multifaceted eyes that seemed to look everywhere at once. Behind her walked her court, a dozen Jathir nobles in ornate armor. And between them, carried in a specialized containment pod, was a small larva about the size of a human 5-year-old. The princess. Shiva, if Marcus remembered correctly. Ambassador Chen stepped forward, bowing perfectly. Marcus mimicked her, hoping he didn't look as terrified as he felt. "Empress Kesrati, the United Earth Government welcomes you to Concordia Prime. We are honored by your presence." The Empress's mandibles clicked in. What the briefing said was acknowledgement. When she spoke, her voice came through a translator device, cool and precise. "Ambassador Chan, we thank you for your welcome. This gathering will serve to strengthen bonds between our peoples." It was going well. Marcus started to relax. Maybe he could slip away soon, and a sound cut through the hall. Not a sound, exactly. More like a feeling of sound, a pressure that made Marcus's teeth ache and his vision blur. Several alien delegates cried out in pain. The telepathic species grabbed their heads and fled the room. The containment pod had opened. Princess Shiva was writhing inside, her small body pulsing with waves of psychic distress. Electronics around the room began to malfunction. Lights flickered. Translation devices screeched feedback. "The princess!" one of the Jathir courtiers shouted. "Her developmental crisis has worsened. We cannot calm her. The psychic emissions will damage the station systems." Empress Kesrati moved to her daughter's side, her 4 arms reaching out, but even she seemed helpless. The psychic waves intensified. Marcus could feel them now, like nails on a chalkboard inside his brain. Ambassador Chen was speaking rapidly into her communicator, calling for medical teams and engineers. Other delegates were evacuating. The reception was falling apart. Marcus didn't think. He just moved. He walked straight toward the containment pod, ignoring the shocked hisses from the Jathir guards. Up close, he could see that Shiva was terrified. Her small body trembled, her underdeveloped limbs thrashing. Whatever was happening to her, she was scared. Marcus knew that feeling. His nephew had autism and sometimes had sensory overloads. Different biology, sure, but fear and pain looked the same everywhere. "Hey," Marcus said softly, kneeling beside the pod. Hey there, little one. That's really scary, isn't it? He started humming. Just a simple tune, something his mother used to hum when he was sick. He tapped his fingers on the side of the pod, creating a rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. Steady. Predictable. Human, step away from the air. A guard moved forward, but Empress Kezrati held up one clawed hand, stopping him. She was watching Marcus with those strange, multifaceted eyes. Marcus kept humming, kept tapping. He pulled out his datapad and brought up a video, something simple. A fractal pattern, endlessly rotating. Colors and shapes in perfect mathematical harmony. See that? He said gently, holding it where Shiva could see. It goes round and round. Same pattern, over and over. Nothing scary. Just peaceful. The psychic waves stuttered. Weakened. Marcus added another element. He started counting, soft and rhythmic. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Rhythm, pattern, predictability. Things an overwhelmed mind could hold on to. Shiva's thrashing slowed. Her psychic emissions dimmed. The lights in the hall stopped flickering. That's it, Marcus whispered. You're doing great. Just breathe. Well, whatever you do instead of breathing. Just easy. Nice and easy. 5 minutes later, the princess was calm. She had curled into a small ball inside her pod, her eyes fixed on the rotating fractal pattern. The psychic distress had faded to almost nothing. The hall was silent. Every camera drone in the room had focused on Marcus and the princess. Every delegate who hadn't fled was staring. Marcus stood up slowly, his knees protesting. He turned to find Empress Kezrati directly behind him, close enough that he could see his reflection in her crystalline exoskeleton. You achieved what my entire court could not, she said. Her voice through the translator was softer now, thoughtful. What my scientists and physicians could not. You calmed the heir to the Jathir Empire. I've worked with kids before, Marcus stammered. She was scared and overwhelmed. Sometimes you just need to give them something steady to focus on. The Empress tilted her head, studying him. Then she did something that made Ambassador Chung gasp audibly. She removed her ceremonial crown and held it in her upper right hand. With her upper left hand, she gestured to Marcus in what the briefing had called the seal of contract. Marcus Webb of Earth, she said, her voice carrying across the silent hall. By the old laws of my people, I offer you the crown marriage. You have demonstrated unique value to the imperial line. Calm my child consistently, provide her the stability she requires, and rule beside me as Emperor Consort of the Jathir Empire. Marcus's brain stuttered to a halt. Marriage, empire, rule. The words didn't make sense together. What? This is a formal proposal under Jathir law, Kezrati continued. You may accept, or you may refuse. But know that your answer will be witnessed by the Galactic Council and will have consequences for both our peoples. Marcus looked at Ambassador Chun. She had gone pale. He looked at the camera drones, all recording. He looked at the princess, still calm in her pod, still watching his fractal pattern. He looked back at the Empress, 9 feet of alien royalty, offering him a crown because he'd been nice to her kid. Can I think about it? Marcus managed to ask. Empress Kezrati's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. You may have one standard cycle to consider. I shall await your answer, Marcus Webb. She turned and swept from the hall, her court following. The princess's pod floated along behind her, but as it passed Marcus, Shiva reached out one small limb and touched the transparent barrier between them. When the Jathir delegation had gone, the hall erupted into chaos. Reporters swarmed Marcus. Ambassador Chun was shouting into 3 communicators at once. Somewhere, Someone was already writing headlines. Marcus stood in the center of it all, his datapad still showing the rotating fractal, and wondered what the hell he'd just done. His communicator buzzed. A message from Earth's diplomatic corps. Do not answer until we convene emergency session. This is now a planet-level incident. Another buzz. This one from his sister. Did you just get proposed to by an alien bug queen? Mom is freaking out. Marcus laughed, slightly hysterical. Yesterday, his biggest problem had been filing quarterly reports. Today, he might become royalty of an interstellar empire, all because he knew how to calm a scared child. The universe, Marcus decided, had a weird sense of humor. The emergency session had lasted 16 hours. Marcus sat in a conference room deep in Concordia Prime's diplomatic wing, surrounded by Earth's top officials who had arrived via emergency transport. His coffee had gone cold hours ago, but he kept drinking it anyway. The strategic advantages are enormous, General Morrison was saying, pacing back and forth. An alliance with the Jathir Empire would triple our defensive capabilities overnight. We'd have access to their trade routes, their technology, their military support. And if he refuses? Someone asked. Then we risk insulting one of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy, Ambassador Chun said quietly. The Jathir take their formal proposals very seriously. Kesrati invoked the old laws in front of the entire Galactic Council. Refusing could be seen as a grave offense. Marcus rubbed his eyes. So I'm supposed to marry an alien empress I've met once, move to a planet I've never seen, and help raise a child whose biology I don't understand. For politics? For peace? Chun corrected gently. And not just politics, Marcus. You genuinely helped that little girl. The Empress saw something in you that her own people couldn't provide. I used techniques I learned helping my nephew through sensory overload, Marcus said. That doesn't make me qualified to be royalty. The Jathir don't see it that way. Dr. Sarah Kim, the xenopsychology expert, interjected. She pulled up a holographic display. I've been researching their culture all night. The crown marriage isn't about romance. It's about complementary competence. The Empress is a brilliant strategist and warrior, but she can't help her daughter. You can. That makes you valuable to the Imperial line. Marcus stared at the display showing Jathir cultural norms. What happened to the last emperor? Killed in battle 3 years ago, Kim said. Kesrati has ruled alone since then, which is unusual. Jathir empresses typically choose consorts who complement their weaknesses. She's been looking for someone who can help with Shiva's condition. And I just happened to stumble into the job interview of the century, Marcus muttered. His communicator buzzed again. More messages from Earth. Some called him a hero. Others called him a traitor for even considering it. The news feeds were having a field day. Human to marry Bug Queen, screamed one particularly tasteless headline. General Morrison leaned forward. Webb, I understand this is overwhelming. But think about what you could do. Not just for Earth, but for humanity's place in the galaxy. We're the new kids. We're seen as primitive, emotional, unpredictable. You could change that. By being a trophy husband? Marcus shot back. By being a bridge, Ambassador Chun said. Marcus, I've watched you work for 3 years. You're good at this. You see connections between cultures that others miss. You find common ground. That's exactly what the galaxy needs right now. Marcus stood and walked to the window. Outside, alien ships docked and undocked from the station in an endless dance. Somewhere out there, the Empress was waiting for his answer. I need to talk to her, he said finally. Not through diplomats or translators or lawyers. Just talk. If I'm going to make this decision, I need to understand what I'm actually agreeing to. Chun smiled. I'll arrange it. The meeting took place in a neutral garden dome, one of Concordia Prime's few green spaces. Marcus arrived early, his heart pounding. He'd changed into formal clothing but refused the elaborate ceremonial outfit the protocol office had suggested. If he was going to do this, he'd do it as himself. Empress Kesrati arrived precisely on time, accompanied by 2 guards who stationed themselves at a respectful distance. Up close, without the chaos of the reception, Marcus could see the fine details of her exoskeleton, the way it shifted colors slightly as she moved. "Marcus Webb," she said, settling onto a bench designed for her species' unique anatomy. "You requested this conversation. I am listening." Marcus sat across from her, suddenly feeling very small. "I need to understand what you're actually asking for. The crown marriage. What does that mean, day to day?" Kesrati's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "You would live on Kazdron, the throne world. You would be educated in Geothir law, culture, and governance. You would assist in ruling the empire, making decisions that affect billions of lives. And you would care for my daughter, using your unique abilities to keep her stable. That's a lot of responsibility for someone who's just good with kids." "You underestimate yourself," Kesrati said. "I have watched the recordings of your interaction with Shiva 17 times. You demonstrated intuition, compassion, and adaptation. These are not common traits, even among my own people." Marcus hesitated, then asked a question that had been bothering him most. "Why me? You have an entire empire of potential consorts. Why offer this to a human you barely know?" The Empress was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than Marcus had heard before. "My daughter is dying. Not quickly, but inevitably. Her neurological condition causes her pain and damages her development. Our best physicians have tried everything. I have spent 3 years searching for a solution, and I have failed her." She looked at Marcus directly, her multifaceted eyes reflecting his image 100 times. "Then, you, a stranger from a species we barely know, calmed her in minutes using methods so simple my scientists dismissed them as impossible. You gave her peace. You gave me hope. That is worth more than all the political alliances in the galaxy." Marcus felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't about politics. Not really. It was about a mother desperate to help her child. "I don't know if I can do it consistently," he said honestly. "I got lucky. What if it doesn't work next time?" "Then we will try something else," Kesrati said. "But you will try. That is what matters. My people are brilliant, Marcus Webb, but we are not adaptable. We follow protocols and procedures. You showed me that sometimes the answer lies outside the protocol." "Tell me about Shiva," Marcus said. "Not the medical stuff. What's she like?" For the first time, Kesrati's posture softened. "Curious. She asks endless questions about everything. Before the crisis worsened, she would explore every corner of the palace, collecting specimens and organizing them into elaborate patterns. She has her father's love of order and my stubbornness." Marcus smiled. "She sounds wonderful." "She is my world," Kesrati said simply. "I would burn the galaxy to ash if it would save her. But instead, I am asking a stranger to help me because pride is worthless when measured against her life." They talked for 2 more hours. Kesrati explained the structure of Zathir government, the role of the emperor consort, and what would be expected of him. Marcus asked about everything from food to religion to what happened if the marriage didn't work out. "There is a trial period," Kesrati explained. 6 lunar cycles. If at the end you wish to leave, you may do so with honor. If I find you unsuitable, I may release you from the contract. But if we both agree to continue, the bond becomes permanent. And if I refuse now, then you refuse. I will not force you, and Earth will not be punished. I would be disappointed, but I would understand." She paused. "However, I do not think you will refuse. Why not? Because you are still here, asking questions, trying to understand. If you intended to refuse, you would have done so already. You are like me, Marcus Webb. You do not abandon those who need you. Marcus laughed despite himself. You've known me for 2 days. I am a good judge of character. It is how I have kept my throne. Khazrati stood, her full height impressive, even in the open garden. I will give you until tomorrow at sunset. But know this, I am offering you not just a crown, but a partnership. I do not need a servant or a trophy. I need someone who will challenge me, who will bring perspectives I lack, who will love my daughter as I do. She turned to leave, then stopped. And perhaps, if we are fortunate, we will also become friends. The throne is lonely, Marcus Webb. It will be less so with you beside me. After she left, Marcus sat in the garden for a long time, watching alien birds flit between earth plants and extraterrestrial flowers. The galaxy was strange and vast and terrifying. But he promised himself, when he joined the diplomatic corps, that he'd make a difference. That he'd help build bridges between worlds. He just never thought the bridge would involve marrying an empress and becoming a stepfather to an alien princess. His communicator buzzed. A message from Shiva herself, transmitted through the Jathir delegation systems. It was a drawing, rendered in crude digital strokes. A stick-figure human standing next to a Jathir larva, both surrounded by stars below it, in carefully translated English. Papa Marcus, come home? Marcus closed his eyes. Then he opened his communicator and began composing his answer to the Empress. Some decisions, he realized, weren't really decisions at all. The throne world of Kazdron looked like something from a nightmare rendered in crystalline beauty. Massive spires of organic architecture stretched toward the red-tinted sky, their surfaces crawling with Jathir citizens going about their daily lives. The air smelled of sulfur and something sweet Marcus couldn't identify. It was beautiful, alien, and absolutely terrifying. Marcus stood on the landing platform in his new ceremonial robes, trying not to throw up from nerves. Behind him, the transport that had brought him from Concordia Prime was already departing. No turning back now? Papa Marcus! A small form came skittering across the platform. Shiva had grown in the weeks since he'd accepted the proposal. Her larval body was already showing the beginning of her adult exoskeleton, patches of crystalline armor forming along her back. Marcus knelt and let her crash into him. She was heavier than a human child, her biology completely different, but the enthusiasm was universal. Hey, kiddo, miss me? 17 days, 4 hours, 22 minutes, Shiva said, her translator rendering her clicks and chirps into precise English. You were gone too long. The new tutor is boring and smells like old stone. Marcus laughed, the tension in his chest easing slightly. Well, I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. The Emperor Consort will come with me, a stern voice said. Warkeeper Dexfar, the head of the Imperial Guard, stood at attention nearby. The massive Jathir warrior had made his opinion of Marcus very clear during the preparation period. Humans were weak. Humans were unsuitable. Humans would fail. Lead the way, Marcus said, standing. He kept one hand on Shiva's back as they walked into the palace. The throne room was vast, its ceiling lost in shadows high above. Hundreds of Jathir nobles lined the walls, their exoskeletons gleaming in the bioluminescent light. At the far end, on a throne that looked grown rather than built, sat Empress Khazrati. She stood as Marcus approached, her forearms spreading in formal greeting. Marcus Webb of Earth, you have accepted the crown marriage and completed the ritual trials. Do you swear to serve the Jathir Empire, to protect its people, and to guide its future alongside me? Marcus had practiced this part. He placed his hand over his heart in the human gesture, then crossed his arms over his chest in the Jathir style. I swear it. From this day until my last, I am yours and the Empire's." The room erupted in clicks and chirps. Not all of them sounded approving. Khazrati descended from her throne and placed a smaller crown on Marcus's head. It was lighter than it looked, warm against his skin. "Then I name you Emperor Consort Marcus, partner to the throne, father to the heir, and voice of the human perspective in Jathir space." The ceremony continued for 3 more hours. Marcus's feet hurt. His head ached from the translator implant they'd installed, and he was fairly certain he'd messed up at least 5 different protocols. But when it was over, he was officially royalty. "You did well," Khazrati said later, in the private quarters they would now share. The rooms were enormous, with separate sleeping chambers adapted for both their biologies. Only 2 minor errors in posture, and the nobles barely noticed. "I felt like I was going to pass out the whole time," Marcus admitted. He collapsed onto the human-style furniture that had been installed for him. "How do you do this every day?" "Practice." And the knowledge that showing weakness would invite challenges. Khazrati settled onto her own resting platform, her exoskeleton dimming to a softer glow in the low light. "You should rest. Tomorrow, your real education begins." Marcus groaned. "Let me guess. More protocols?" "Governance," Khazrati corrected. "You are not merely ceremonial, Marcus. You are expected to contribute. I suggest you prepare yourself." The next morning, Marcus discovered what she meant. He was thrown directly into the deep end of running an interstellar empire. The first crisis was a labor dispute on a mining colony. Production had dropped 40%, and the local governor was demanding Marcus approve harsh penalties for the workers. Marcus studied the reports, frowning. The numbers didn't make sense. Production had dropped, yes, but so had injury rates and equipment malfunctions. He called a video conference with the mine supervisors. "Why are the workers slowing down?" he asked directly. The supervisor's translator rendered his clicks as confused. "They claim exhaustion, Emperor Consort, but their shifts are standard. 12 hours, 6 days per cycle. 12 hours of mining? In high gravity? Without breaks? Breaks are inefficient." Marcus thought of every labor study he'd ever read, every burnout case he'd seen in the diplomatic corps. What if we tried something? Reduce shifts to 10 hours, add rest periods every 3 hours, and give workers 1 full day off per cycle. The supervisor's exoskeleton actually changed color in shock. That would reduce productivity further. Try it for 1 cycle. Track the results. I think you'll be surprised. The supervisor clearly thought Marcus was insane, but he was the Emperor Consort. The order was implemented. 3 weeks later, Marcus was in a council meeting when the report came through. Productivity hadn't dropped. It had increased by 28%. Workers were making fewer mistakes, equipment lasted longer, and morale had improved dramatically. "How did you know?" Khazrati asked him privately after the meeting. Several nobles had looked at Marcus with new respect, while others seemed even more suspicious. "Humans figured this out centuries ago," Marcus said. "Exhausted workers are inefficient workers. Sometimes the best way to improve productivity is to let people rest. Rest is weakness," Dexfer growled from his position by the door. "Rest is strategic," Marcus corrected. "A well-rested soldier fights better than an exhausted one. Same principle." The warkeeper's mandibles clicked in what might have been grudging acknowledgement. The successes continued. Marcus introduced concept after concept that seemed obvious to him but revolutionary to the Jathir. Workers' councils where grievances could be aired. Anonymous feedback systems. Mental health supports for colonies under stress. "You are changing the empire," Khazrati told him one evening. They were in her study, reviewing proposals together. Over the months, they had fallen into an easy working relationship. She taught him Jathir's strategy and law. He showed her human psychology and social structures. "I'm just applying common sense," Marcus said. "Common to you, perhaps. To us, these concepts are alien." She tilted her head in a way that meant she was amused. "We are a species of warriors and builders. We never learned to care for the wounded spirit, only the wounded body." "Maybe that's what I'm here for," Marcus said. "To teach you that caring isn't weakness." Their relationship was strange but growing stronger. They weren't in love, not in the romantic sense, but there was deep respect, trust, something that might become genuine affection given time. With Shiva, things were simpler. She had attached herself to Marcus completely. He spent hours with her every day, teaching her human games and stories, helping her through the difficult stages of her development. Her psychic crises had become rare and manageable. "Papa Marcus," she asked one day while they were in the garden, "why are you different from other adults?" "Different how?" "You play. You laugh. You tell jokes even when they're not efficient." She arranged stones in careful patterns as she spoke. "Mother says efficiency is everything." Marcus smiled. "Your mother is brilliant and strong and one of the best leaders I've ever met. But humans believe that life should also have joy, not just efficiency." "I like joy," Shiva decided. "Tell me another story about Earth." But not everyone was happy with the changes. Dexter had been watching Marcus with increasing hostility. Finally, during a public court session, the Warkeeper stepped forward. "I invoke the right of challenge," he announced, his voice echoing through the throne room. The room fell silent. Khazrati's exoskeleton darkened, a sign of anger. "Warkeeper, explain yourself." "The Emperor Consort has brought softness to the Empire, weakness. Our colonies rest when they should work. Our citizens complain when they should obey. This is not the Jathir way." Dexter pointed at Marcus with one clawed hand. "I challenge his fitness to rule. Let him prove his worth through trial." Marcus felt his heart sink. He'd known this was coming. The traditionalist faction had been growing more vocal, more angry at every change he introduced. Khazrati stood, her full height and presence commanding. "You challenge my consort? You question my judgment?" "I question whether a human can truly understand what the Empire needs," Dexter said. "I invoke the old laws. Let him face the trial of worth." Khazrati looked at Marcus. He could see the conflict in her posture. She couldn't refuse the challenge without undermining the very traditions that gave her authority. But agreeing to it put Marcus at risk. Marcus stood. His legs shook, but he kept his voice steady. "What is the trial of worth?" "Combat or task," Dexter said with clear satisfaction. "The challenger chooses." "I choose task. Resolve the crisis of the Outer Rim within 30 standard days. If you succeed, I acknowledge your worth. If you fail, you leave the Empire, and the Empress chooses a suitable consort from the noble houses." The Outer Rim. Marcus had heard about it in briefings. 3 colony worlds on the edge of rebellion, mismanaged and angry. Every administrator sent there had failed. It was an impossible task, which was exactly why Dexter had chosen it. Marcus looked at Khazrati. She met his eyes, and in that moment, he understood. She couldn't help him. This was his test alone. IAC, the mining colony of Kazmir, looked like hell. Red dust covered everything, blown by winds that never stopped. The workers lived in pressurized domes that had been erected decades ago and barely maintained since. Marcus stepped off the transport and immediately understood why this place was in rebellion. Emperor Consort, the local administrator, greeted him. Administrator Vexco was old by Jathir standards, his exoskeleton scarred and dull. "I must warn you, the workers are hostile. They have refused to meet quotas for 6 cycles now. I recommend immediate disciplinary action. I'd like to tour the facilities first, Marcus said, and talk to the workers. Without guards. Veshkol's mandibles clicked in disapproval, but he didn't argue. Marcus was royalty, after all. The mine itself was worse than the surface. Narrow tunnels, barely maintained equipment, and heat that made Marcus's human body pour sweat within minutes. He found a work crew and sat down on a boulder, ignoring the supervisor's protests. "Hey," he said to the nearest worker. "Mind if we talk?" The worker, a younger Jathir covered in rock dust, stared at him. "You're the human emperor. Why would you want to talk to me?" "Because I'm trying to figure out why this place is falling apart, and I'm guessing you know better than any administrator." That got the workers' attention. Soon, Marcus was surrounded by the crew, all of them talking over each other, venting frustrations that had been building for years. The quotas were impossible. The equipment broke constantly. The supervisors didn't listen. Nobody cared if they lived or died as long as the minerals kept flowing. Marcus listened for 3 hours, taking notes on his datapad. Then he moved to the next crew and the next. He spent 4 days in the mines, working alongside the miners, experiencing the conditions firsthand. His hands blistered. His back ached. He nearly got crushed when a support beam failed, but he learned. The problem wasn't the workers. It was the quota system. Some algorithm on the homeworld set production targets without understanding ground conditions. When miners missed quotas, they were punished, which led to cutting corners, which led to accidents, which led to more missed quotas. A death spiral. Marcus pulled up the algorithm and studied it. Then he did something radical. He called a colony-wide assembly and brought the workers and administrators together. "I'm suspending the current quota system," he announced. "Effective immediately. Instead, work crews will report weekly on actual ground conditions. You'll set your own realistic targets based on what's actually achievable. Meet those targets consistently, and quotas increase gradually. Miss them, and we investigate why instead of punishing." The room erupted. Workers were shocked. Administrators were horrified. Vexkol looked like Marcus had just suggested they abandon the mine entirely. "This is chaos," the old administrator protested. "They'll set targets so low nothing gets done." "Then we'll adjust," Marcus said calmly. "But I'm betting they won't. I'm betting that if you treat people like they have brains and give them control over their work, they'll take pride in it." It took 2 weeks, but Marcus was right. Production didn't drop. It stabilized, then began climbing. Workers who'd been sabotaging equipment to get rest periods started maintaining it properly. Accidents decreased. Morale improved, 1 world down. 2 to go. Shitala was different. An agricultural colony, it had once been the Empire's breadbasket. Now, crop failures had left the population starving and desperate. Marcus arrived to find fields of dead plants and farmers on the edge of revolt. The problem here was environmental. Decades of intensive farming without crop rotation or soil management had depleted the land. The Jathir hadn't thought about it because they'd never had to. Their homeworld had such rich soil that they'd never learned sustainable farming, but humans had. Marcus grew up in rural Iowa, and his grandfather had been a farmer. He gathered the agricultural specialists and started teaching. Crop rotation, composting, cover crops to restore nitrogen. Techniques humans had developed over thousands of years of agriculture. "This will take cycles to show results," one specialist protested. "The people are hungry now. Then we import food from other colonies while the soil recovers," Marcus said. "And we start growing fast-yield crops in hydroponics to supplement. It's not perfect, but it'll work." He spent his nights designing hydroponic systems using local materials, his days teaching farmers how to build them. The Jathir were skeptical at first, but desperation made them willing to try. 2 weeks in, the first hydroponic crops matured. Not much, but enough to feed families who hadn't had fresh food in months. The farmers began to believe. Marcus was working in a field when his communicator buzzed. A message from Kesdron. From Shiva. Papa Marcus, Mama Empress says the strongest warriors know when to be soft. You are our warrior of hearts. Come home. He smiled, dirt on his face, exhaustion in his bones, but feeling more alive than he had in months. Soon, kiddo. Just one more stop. Vextron was the military outpost, and it was where everything went wrong. Marcus arrived to find a colony on the brink of mutiny. Supplies were short. Equipment was failing. The soldiers felt abandoned by the empire they protected. He started investigating the supply chains and found corruption. Noble houses were skimming resources meant for the outpost, selling them on black markets. The evidence was clear in the ledgers once Marcus knew where to look. He compiled everything and prepared to send it to Kesrati. Then armed soldiers burst into his quarters. You're asking too many questions, human, their leader said. These weren't colony defense forces. They were mercenaries, hired by the corrupt nobles to eliminate the problem. Marcus ran. He wasn't a fighter, wasn't trained in combat. He made it maybe 50 meters before they cornered him in a storage bay. The leader raised a weapon. Marcus closed his eyes, thinking of Kesrati and Shiva, hoping they'd understand he'd tried. Then the workers from Kazmir crashed through the door. Nobody kills our emperor. The worker Marcus had first talked to growled. Behind him, dozens of miners poured into the bay, armed with mining tools and righteous anger. They'd heard about the attempt on Marcus's life and commandeered a transport to get here. The mercenaries fled. Marcus collapsed against the wall, shaking. Why? He asked the miner. Why risk yourselves for me? You're the first royal who ever gave a damn about us, the miner said simply. We take care of our own. Marcus sent the corruption evidence to Kesrati with a full report. Within days, 3 noble houses were stripped of their holdings. The supply lines to Vextron were restored and placed under direct imperial oversight. But the assassination attempt had shaken Marcus badly. He'd been stabbed with something during the fight. Some local toxin that wasn't fatal to Jathir, but made him desperately sick. He spent 3 days in a medical unit, feverish and barely conscious in his delirium. He kept thinking he was back on Earth, that the whole thing had been a dream. What was he doing here? He wasn't a hero, wasn't a warrior. He was just a guy who was good with kids and knew a bit about farming. Was it enough? Could it ever be enough? Then Shiva's message played again on his communicator, her voice cutting through the fever. You are our warrior of hearts. Marcus opened his eyes. A warrior of hearts. Not of weapons or violence, but of caring, of trying, of refusing to give up even when it was hard. Yeah, he could be that on day 28. Marcus returned to Kesdron. All 3 colonies had sent delegations with him, representatives who wanted to personally thank the Emperor Consort and petition the Empress. The throne room was packed when he arrived. Dexver stood at the center, waiting. The 30 days have concluded, the Warkeeper announced. The human has returned. But has he succeeded? The delegation leaders stepped forward, one from each colony. Kazmir speaks, the mining representative said. The Emperor Consort, Marcus, listened when others commanded. He gave us dignity when others gave us only demands. Production has increased 28%, and accidents have decreased by half. We declare him worthy. Shitala speaks, the agricultural specialist said. The Emperor Consort Marcus brought knowledge when we had only despair. Our fields are recovering. Our people are fed. We declare him worthy. Vextron speaks, the military commander said. The Emperor Consort Marcus exposed corruption and nearly died defending our world. We declare him worthy, and asked that his reforms be extended empire-wide. The room was silent. Dexver stood frozen, his challenge utterly defeated. Kesrati rose from her throne. Warkeeper Dexver, the trial has concluded. What say you? For a long moment, Dexver said nothing. Then he approached Marcus and did something Marcus never expected. He knelt. I was wrong, the warrior said, his voice carrying through the hall. I believe strength meant hardness. You have shown me that sometimes strength means caring when others would not. I acknowledge your worth, Emperor Consort Marcus, and I ask your forgiveness for doubting you. Marcus helped him stand. No forgiveness needed. You were protecting the empire you love. I respect that. After the ceremony, after the celebrations, Marcus finally made it back to his quarters. He was exhausted, still recovering, and wanted nothing more than sleep. But Shiva was waiting for him, and he swept her into a hug before settling onto the couch. She curled against him, chittering contentedly. Kesrati entered and sat beside them. For a moment, The alarm woke Marcus at what his body still insisted was 3 in the morning. He stumbled out of bed, pulling on his robes as Kesrati was already striding toward the command center. 6 months as Emperor Consort had taught him that alarms at this hour meant bad news. The command center was chaos. Military officers shouted reports while holographic displays showed a massive fleet at the edge of Jothir space. Marcus counted the ships and felt his stomach drop. Hundreds of them, all bearing the markings of the Kresh Dominion. Status report, Kesrati commanded, a voice cutting through the noise. The Kresh fleet entered our space 40 minutes ago, Admiral Sektar reported. They're holding position at the border, but made no hostile moves yet. They transmitted a message. It's addressed to you specifically, Empress. The holographic display shifted. A Kresh commander appeared, his species humanoid but covered in metallic scales that caught the light like oil on water. When he spoke, his smile showed too many teeth. Empress Kesrati of the Jothir Empire. I am Commander Velshax of the Kresh Dominion. We come with a simple offer. Surrender the human Marcus Webb and the psychic anomaly known as Princess Shiva to us within 12 standard hours, or we will take them by force. Your fleet in this sector is no match for ours. Choose wisely. The transmission ended. The command center fell silent. They want Shiva, Marcus said quietly. Why? Kesrati's exoskeleton had darkened to almost black, a sign of pure rage. Intelligence suggests the Kresh have been developing psychic weapons. Shiva's rare neurology would allow them to understand how to weaponize psychic abilities across entire populations. And me? You can influence species that should be immune to emotional manipulation, Admiral Sektar said grimly. They would study you, dissect how you do it, and replicate it. The Kresh could use such knowledge to conquer entire civilizations by turning their own emotions against them. Marcus looked at the fleet display. The numbers were clear. The Jothir forces in this sector were badly outnumbered. Reinforcements would take days to arrive. People were going to die. Then I'll surrender myself, Marcus said. By time for evacuation and reinforcements. They can study me all they want if it saves lives. No, Kesrati's voice was absolute. You are Emperor Consort. You do not sacrifice yourself. I'm a father first, Marcus shot back. And Shiva needs to be protected. If giving myself up is that, then that's what I do. They faced each other. The command center staff suddenly very interested in their displays. This was their first real argument as rulers, and everyone could feel the tension crackling. You would leave your daughter? Kesrati demanded. Leave me? To save her? To save you? In a heartbeat. Kesrati's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of distress Marcus had learned to recognize. This is foolish, illogical, inefficient. Yeah, well, welcome to being human. We do stupid things for the people we love." The word hung in the air, love. They danced around it for months. But neither had said it directly until now. Kasrati touched his face, her clawed hand trembling slightly. "Then we will find another way. Together. Because I cannot lose you." Marcus Webb. And that is perhaps the most illogical thing of all. Marcus took her hand in his. An awkward gesture, given their different biologies, but meaningful. "Then let's think. The Kresh are aggressive and arrogant. They think they've already won. How do we use that against them?" They worked through the night, pulling in every advisor and strategist they had. Marcus kept thinking about the Kresh commander's smile, his absolute confidence. The Dominion had conquered dozens of species. They saw the Jathir as just another obstacle to remove, but they didn't understand humans. And Marcus was starting to form an idea so crazy it might actually work. "We can't fight them militarily," he said, staring at the fleet display. "But we don't have to. The Kresh Empire is built on conquest. They enslave the species they defeat and force them into military service. What if we could reach those slaves? They're scattered across hundreds of ships," Admiral Sektar protested. "And heavily controlled. But not deaf," Marcus said. He turned to Kasrati. "Shiva can project emotions across distances, right? What if we amplified that? Used it to broadcast not just feelings, but hope?" Dr. Viksha, the chief scientist, clicked her mandibles thoughtfully. "Theoretically possible. Princess Shiva's psychic range is limited, but with the right equipment and willing participation, we could boost the signal across the entire fleet." "But what would you broadcast?" "Pain would be cool, and the Kresh commanders are resistant to emotional manipulation." "Not pain," Marcus said. "Love, hope, freedom. Everything those enslaved species haven't felt in generations. We remind them what it's like to be free." The room erupted in debate. It was risky, untested, and required Shiva's direct participation. But as the hours ticked down and no better option emerged, even the skeptics began to consider it. Marcus went to see Shiva. She was in her chambers with her tutors, but she dismissed them when she saw her father's face. "Papa Marcus, you're scared," she said immediately. "I can feel it." Marcus sat beside her. "Yeah, kiddo. There are bad people who want to hurt you and use your abilities for terrible things. I need to ask you to do something brave and a little scary. But I need you to know you can say no." He explained the plan. Shiva listened, her young face serious. "If I help, the slaves could be free?" she asked. "Maybe. Probably. I hope so." "Then I'll do it. You taught me that helping others is always worth it, even when it's hard." She grabbed his hand with her small claw. "And you'll be there with me, right?" "Every second," Marcus promised. The equipment was assembled in the palace's communication center. Shiva sat in a specially designed chamber while Marcus stood beside her, ready to guide her through the emotional broadcast. Kasrati commanded the military response from the war room, but she kept a direct line open to watch. The Kresh fleet began moving. Their 12 hours were up. "Shiva, whenever you're ready," Marcus said gently. The princess closed her eyes and reached for the feeling Marcus had been teaching her to find. Not fear or pain, but love. The feeling of being cared for, of mattering, of being free to choose your own path. The amplification equipment hummed to life. Shiva's psychic broadcast, normally limited to a few hundred meters, suddenly reached across space itself. In the Kresh fleet, enslaved soldiers felt something they hadn't experienced in years. Hope, love, the memory of freedom. The feeling crashed over them like a wave, breaking through the psychological conditioning and fear that had kept them compliant. Mutinies erupted across 17 ships simultaneously. Enslaved species turned on their Kresh overseers, fighting for the freedom they'd been reminded existed. Now, Kasrati commanded. The Zhathir fleet, waiting in defensive positions, struck at the destabilizing crash formation. But Marcus wasn't done. He'd had Earth send something special via emergency courier. Every piece of human media he could gather. Music, movies, books, art. The story of humanity's own struggles for freedom and dignity, as the crash fleet descended into chaos. Marcus began broadcasting. Not psychically, but through every communication channel he could hack into. Human voices singing songs of revolution and hope. Human stories of ordinary people standing up to tyrants. Human art depicting freedom and choice and love. The enslaved species in the crash fleet heard humans. A species as physically weak as many of them, refusing to accept oppression. They heard music about breaking chains. They saw images of people choosing defiance over safety, and they chose freedom. The crash formation collapsed. Ship after ship fell to internal rebellion. The ones that remained tried to retreat, but they were harried by both the Zhathir military and their own former slaves. Commander Vel'Shax transmitted one final message, his scaled face twisted in rage. "You've won today, human. But you've shown the galaxy what your species is capable of. You've made yourselves a target." "Good," Marcus said into the broadcast. "Let every tyrant in the galaxy know that humanity stands with the oppressed. That we will always choose freedom over safety. That we love loudly and messily and without apology. Come at us if you want, but know that we'll fight you with every weapon we have, including hope." The crash fleet jumped to hyperspace, retreating in disorder. The crisis was over. Marcus collapsed against the console, exhausted. Shiva was already asleep in her chamber, drained but safe. Around the palace, celebrations were beginning. Kazrati found him in the communication center, still staring at the displays. "You started a revolution," she said quietly. "The crash slaves who survived are requesting asylum. We'll have to create an entirely new district to house them all. Is that okay?" Marcus asked. "It is unprecedented, chaotic, inefficient." She touched his face. "It is exactly what you do best, and I would not change it for anything." Marcus stood and pulled her close, an awkward embrace given their different heights and biology, but familiar now. "I love you, you know. I don't say it enough, but I do. You and Shiva both. You're my family. And you are mine," Kazrati said. "I did not understand love before you. I thought it was a weakness, an inefficiency. But you showed me it is the greatest strength of all. The willingness to fight for those who matter to you." The formal coronation ceremony took place a week later. Marcus had been emperor consort for months, but now the trial period was officially over.